T. Good Tavach and welcome, folks. L'chaim v'li bracha. I made my blessings for all. To life and to blessings.
Amen.
All right. So yesterday was Tu B'Av, Hamishasa B'Av, the 15th day of the month of Av. And the Mishnah in Tainus, the tractate Tainus, speaks actually about fasting. Says Lo hayu yom tovim liYisrael, that there were not festivals for the Jewish people, like the festivals of the 15th day of Av, which was yesterday, and Yom Kippur. That itself is like fascinating. 15th of Av. Anybody heard about it? Tu B'Av. And not only it's the two greatest festivals at Yom Kippur, it precedes Yom Kippur. What's going on over here? Today's the 16th of Av. Today is my wife's mother, Princess Sarah Bas Esther China, her yahrzeit. May her neshama go from strength to strength. 21st yahrzeit. Oh, my dear sister Leora from the Holy Land is here with us. Welcome. So on that day of Chamishasa B'Av, on the 15th day of Av, the young maidens that needed a shidduch, needed to get married, of Jerusalem, they would borrow from each other clothing so that the rich shouldn't look rich and the poor look poor. They borrowed from each other. They went out in the fields and they danced. And they would say, Sana, Bocher, Sana inecha, young man, pick up your eyes and see what you're choosing for yourself. That's a Mishnah. Brisa goes and says 3 different types of choosing. There's a lot in this. Choose beauty, choose family, or choose your choice for the sake of heaven. So imagine, picture the scene in Jerusalem, such a unbelievable middle of the summer matchmaking festival. Other people have festivals that are, definitely not for the sake of heaven, but this one was. So it was, again, as we mentioned, as many of the commentaries explained, for those who had challenge difficulties, this was the day that matchmaking worked. So it means it was a second chance, if you will, for those that needed to have their match. Right? So let's understand that. What does that mean exactly? How do we appreciate it? How do we understand that? This second chance over here. So if you recall, we several weeks ago, Parshas Chukas, where in that Torah portion, Aaron, the high priest, Aaron HaKohen, he passed away. And it says that the men, women, Torah scholars, the ordinary folk alike, they all wept because of his passing. Right? Medrash tells us, our sages tell us, there were thousands of people who were named after Arai. Thousands of people who were named after him. Why? Because he brought peace between husband and wife, between friends that had a falling out. And as a result of the peace that he was able to create, there were thousands of people named after him. Now, thousands of people, how do we understand that? What does it mean? He had thousands of people that he was involved with? Is that possible? No, he's one person. How do we understand that? Anybody who's a marriage counselor, you know that they have to meet with someone one time, right? Several times. One time's not going to do the job, right? So what? He met with husband and wife doing marriage counseling. What happened over here? How's that possible? How do we understand that? It's not, not likely. Um, so perhaps we can understand. Perhaps we can understand this way. If you recall, when Yisro came, the father-in-law of Moshe, he said, Moshe, what you're doing is not really good. You're judging the people just by yourself. You have to appoint other people to be judges, and that the burden should be merely upon you. And God accepted that there should be other judges. So the question, of course, is asked, what was Moshe thinking? What, he needed Yisro to come and tell him something that was perhaps pretty obvious? So Moshe's intent that he should be the judge was very simple. He knows who he is. He knows the holiness that God has imbued him with. Not that he takes the holiness and thinks that he's great because of it, but he's aware that he's imbued with a specialness that others don't have. And he realizes that if two people, two litigants, or a husband and wife that are having a difficulty, or two litigants in law opposing each other, would stand before him, their opposition between each other would melt away. They would be nullified before the holiness of Moshe Rabbeinu, and that would do it all, right? That would resolve everything. That's what he was thinking, Moshe. Right? So in a similar manner, we could say about Aaron. Why was Aaron so successful in marriage counseling? Not because he did any counseling. People stood before him, their problems melted away. I actually had a similar, instance with the head rabbi of the Chabad community here in Montreal, who's passed away, Rabbi Hendel. Okay, he's not a rebbe, but he was a special man, and his English was not so good. Yiddish was his, first language, and this couple that were having difficulties, came before him. So I was there to translate. I knew them, close with them, so I translated. It was amazing. What he said wasn't necessarily anything extraordinary, but his presence was extraordinary. and then before a Rav, and so the kind of nullified a lot of the extraneous things, the negative things that need not be there, and was able to create peace, right? Um, Now I'm going to leave that and now bring that to Aaron. That Aaron had that quality. He was also a holy man, like Moshe Rabbeinu, like Moses, and therefore, standing before him, he was able, in perhaps no time, little time, shall we say, to be able to inspire that there should be peace between husband and wife, between two friends that had a falling out. He was able to inspire that. Hmm. Very interesting. Now, let us take this a step further. The Tzemach Tzedek, third Lubavitcher Rebbe. So um, he explains, says there are three obligations that a husband has to a wife. Share ksus v'ino. Share means food. Ksus means clothing. Ino means marriage obligations, intimate obligations. So Tzemach Tzedek says that the word oino, why would it be used such a term? Because the word oino means a response. So how would oino be a term that's used for intimacy, a response? It means a time period, which that is understood because intimacy is a time period. Oino means response. So he explains that this actually teaches us a response or an answer to something. So he explains that marriage is really about responding to each other, responding to the needs of each other. Marriage is recognizing that there's a need that another has, and you respond to it rather than making light of that need, but responding to that need. Fascinating idea. And this is the heart of marriage. Right. If we can't respond to the need of another, then all we are is wrapped in ourselves and not there for another. Marriage means to be able to perceive that need. So this is what Aaron did. He went straight to the heart. Are you providing for the need of the other? Or are you just seeking your own need in this relationship? And that's how Aaron was able to bring peace very quickly. His presence But his presence then took away the exterior of an individual, which the exterior of the individual is the exterior of the heart is that I am self-directed, seeking my own needs to be fulfilled, and digging more deeply into the individual. And how could you provide the need for another? Wow, this is quite fascinating. And just to bring this idea out, I'd like to share of what it means, holy people. The Rebbe, our dear Rebbe, had the burden of not only all of his Chassidim upon him, but all of Klal Yisrael, the entire Jewish people, those that came to him, and even those that didn't come to him, those who felt connected and those who didn't feel connected. He still had their burden. And for that matter, the entire world. That's a heavy load. That's what Rebbe is. Rosh B'nai Israel. Rebbe is an acronym, head of the Jewish people. And since the Jewish people are light unto the nations, so by extension, all of humanity. And, many non-Jews came to the Rebbe. The Rebbetzin in her later years suffered from a severe leg pain. And one Friday night, that pain was so severe that she couldn't walk. Now, most people, when they're in pain, they want to share their pain with another, especially their husband, right? Misery loves company. And if you're feeling miserable, you want company. That's how, most of us are. The Rebbetzin knew, though, that when the Rebbe comes home, that's the only time that he unburdens. When he's with her. And she didn't want that he should now have another burden, her pain. So you know what? She asked the young man, well, I don't know if it was a young man, I don't think it was a young man at that time, but Chesed Halberstam, who helped in the home. It was Friday night. Usually she would serve the food. It was just her and her husband. So you know what? Set up the first course. So that way I don't have to move about and the Rebbe won't know. The Rebbe won't know that of my pain. He's got enough on his plate. So Chesed was thinking, well, that's good for the first course, but what's going to happen with the soup? How's that going to help for the, right? But he knows not to ask a question because it's the Rebbetzin. And this is what she wants. Well, this is what's going to happen, and this is what needs to happen, and this is the right thing to do. And she's a holy lady. So he sets everything up. And then in the middle of, at the end of the first course, the Rebbe starts to sing. Azamre Bishvachim. And in the middle of singing, he closes his eyes. Now, I don't think in the story, it doesn't say, but I think usually the Rebbe would look into the siddur to sing the song. I think, but maybe not. But he closes his eyes and his soul is soaring lofty. And in that moment, while he's closing his eyes, Chesed Halbersham took all of the plates away and brought the soup. And then the Rebbe opened up his eyes. And guess what? They continued the meal. I think here, this just exemplifies something so amazing and so beautiful between two people. She wants to give the Rebbe, to unburden the Rebbe. The Rebbe also hid himself. He closed his eyes. He hid um, Rebbe hid from him, right? He- She hid her pain. And the Rebbe hid himself also by closing his eyes. I say, whoa, 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 whoa. But she didn't want that. No, you're in pain, you're in pain. She didn't want that, so he hid himself. Unreal. The When the Rebbetzin passed away, there was a black woman who was helping the Rebbetzin for the last few years. She came close with the Rebbetzin. And one time she came down and she was crying before Rabbi Groner, the Rebbe's secretary, who was in the house. The Rebbe stayed in the house for the first year, for the most part. Um, Prayed there 3 times a day in the house, saying Kaddish for his wife. And she came crying and she says, "Oh, he must be really pained by the passing of the Rebbetzin." She says, "That I've already cried for, but now I'm crying for him. When he used to come home, he used to come home bent over and like pale because he had the burden of all of you. Everybody had the burden. And when he came home and he would sit down for tea with his wife, you could see that the color came back to him. He sat up straight and and now he doesn't have her. Wow. Uh, uh, Anyways, unreal. All right, folks, that's Tu B'Av, 15th of Av. May we have, may we merit such a union and oneness for those who don't have it yet, whether they're married or not married. May we merit such a beautiful union.